So most of us learned about sex in bits and pieces, a warning here, a rumour there, and somehow by adulthood we're expected to know what we're doing. But when it comes to oral sex, specifically cunnilingus, there can still be, well, I suppose a lot of guessing and rushing and overthinking and hoping for the best. But what actually makes someone good at it? I'm Jennifer Zamparelli, and today I'm joined by Ian Kerner, a licensed psychotherapist, internationally recognised sex therapist, and the New York Times bestselling author of She Comes First, The Thinking Man's Guide to Pleasuring a Woman. Esther Perel called him one of the most recognisable voices in clinical sex therapy, and today he joins me for a practical, honest conversation about how to give good oral sex. Ian, you're very welcome. How are you?
I'm well, Jennifer. It's lovely to meet you, and I'm looking forward to this. It's going to be fun.
Well, I'm very interested to hear a man tell me all about my clitoris.
Okay. Well, no, I wouldn't presume. I'm just trying to help men along a bit, you know. Yeah, let's do it. Let's talk about clitoris and getting clitorate.
I love that phrase as well. We need to start with the book, because before we get into oral sex and all that kind of stuff, She Comes First. Let's talk about that book. How did it come about? Why did it come about?
Well, it came about for two reasons. I mean, first off, there's a personal reason. So when I was growing up here in New York City, I like to tell my patient, I've noticed with my patients that people usually grow up in one of three sexual backgrounds, home environments. You can grow up in a sex-positive sexual environment, which is quite rare. You can grow up in a sex-negative environment where there's a lot of shame and embarrassment around sexuality, or you can grow up in a sex avoidant home environment where sex just sort of isn't discussed at all and just doesn't really exist. And so I grew up with a single mom in what was very much a sex avoidant home, and I was launching as a sexual adult. This was really pre-internet, men's magazines and whatnot. I was really kind of sexually clueless. And I discovered that I had a lot of sexual problems and that I was not a good lover. I suffered from very common male sexual problems. But it really unnerved me. It really depressed me.
Mm-hmm.
I felt like I couldn't connect the sex that I wanted to have in my head to my body. And yet I really wanted to be a lover. I wanted to connect sexually. I felt like I really wanted those experiences. So when I finally got to college, I started doing a lot of research about how to sort of become a sexual adult. And on the heels of the feminist sexual revolution, I learned a lot about female sexuality. For example, that the vagina itself has relatively few sensitive nerve endings internally. I mean, vaginas are really meant to deliver babies, and so you don't need more sensitive nerve endings. You probably need fewer. And so I really learned about the power of the clitoris, and that the clitoris is really the powerhouse of the female orgasm, and that the clitoris responds to stimulation, not penetration. And so it was kind of mind-blowing because I realized, wow, even if I could have the penis that I wanted to have during sex, if I could last as long as I wanted during sex, it did not mean that I would have a satisfied partner. And so I always held that knowledge in my mind. It really informed how I grew into a lover. And as I became a psychotherapist and as I began working with sexuality, the number one question that I heard from women well into the 90s, well into the 2000s was, what can I do to have an orgasm? What am I doing wrong? And I just felt like, wow, you're not doing anything wrong. It's really that our society is ill-clitorate, that we just do not understand the role of clitoral stimulation and how to do it.
Okay, so a lot of self-exploration on the way as well. I'd say you had great fun putting all that knowledge into practical use through your college days. You wrote the book. It was around the time of Sex in the City. Samantha was overtly very sexual and out there and talking about orgasm. It was all, we had having this sexual revolution. I remember watching it in my 20s and loving it. But then the Super Bowl happened. Janet Jackson slipped her nip on stage. And that kind of set you back a little bit with the book, right?
Yeah, it was Nipplegate. My book was about to come out. I was scheduled to do TV and radio, and then every broadcaster totally dropped me 100%. It was incredibly disappointing because I really believed so much in the book. I put so much work into it, and it was very difficult. Yeah, we sort of went, everything kind of went radio silent. Interestingly, I was able to do a television show here in New York called The Today Show. For some reason, they were willing to book me, and I was very excited. But then I got there on set, and they gave me a list of words I could absolutely not say. Female orgasm, vulva, vagina, clitoris. Great. How am I supposed to talk about the book? And then they made an announcement to the audience. They said, this book is so scandalous. The title, is so controversial, we can't even show you the title. And so they did a graphic of the book with the title covered with a bow. And everyone was like, what is this? What is this book that's so scandalous that it's on the show, but the author can't discuss it really, and they can't tell the title. And then everyone went out and looked, and it was like kind of anticlimactic, like She Comes First, right? Could have been about like presidential first ladies for all we know.
And just to remind, that was, we're talking 2004?
2004, yeah.
That
Sex in the City is going strong.
Yeah.
There's Viagra commercials, Cialis commercials everywhere, but I can't talk about the female orgasm, and I can't say She Comes First. But that did help to launch a bit of a media strategy, and the book really did catch on. I was very, very passionate about it. I took every opportunity I could, and it really filled an information gap at the time.
Okay. Do you think 20 years later, we still have problems talking about oral sex?
I do. I do. I mean, I think in some ways we've really advanced. I meet more men than ever who are eager to give oral sex, and we can talk about this, but it's actually women who are sometimes very reluctant to receive. Back when I was writing the book, a vibrator wasn't really considered a sex toy for a couple. It was really a woman's sex toy. And today, men are bringing vibrators into the bedroom with them and understand much more the principles of clitoral stimulation and pleasure. So I think, yeah, we have advanced quite a bit. But, we still live in a culture where the orgasm gap is quite wide, where something close to 80% of women do not orgasm from intercourse alone. But if you add assisted intercourse, if you add clitoral stimulation, I call it intercourse plus, that statistic literally flips on its head, and 80% of women do experience orgasm. So I think we still need to close the orgasm gap. I'm not speaking for Ireland or Dublin.
You can speak for us. Yeah, absolutely. Do you find it quite mad that, all these years later, you're still talking about this book? I mean, little did you know when you wrote it back in 2004, you'd be speaking to me in Ireland, and it's also relevant now more than ever.
I'm grateful that I'm still speaking about it. I mean, it's a book that I wrote over 20 years ago, and in an age of TikTok and YouTube and self-help and whatnot, the fact that, an instruction guide on cunnilingus is still, and clitoral stimulation is still resonating is remarkable. So I am surprised and I am
delighted.
Grateful. Yeah.
Okay, so what are the parts of She Comes First that you think really still hold up or are completely true today?
Well, I think especially in our, age of porn and in a culture that is still really sex negative, and sex avoidant. I think men and women both go into sex with a lot of performance anxiety. I think we're still very intercourse focused. If you were to ask heterosexual couples, to what extent was intercourse part of your last sexual event, penis and vagina intercourse? The statistic is that over 95% would say yes. If you ask those couples, how long does it take you to get to intercourse once you commence a sexual event, the average is less than 5 minutes. And, when you look at female vaginal distance, which is the distance between the clitoris and the vaginal entrance, and that distance can be anywhere from 2 to 5 centimeters. But what that basically means is if you accept that the clitoris really is responsible for generating arousal and producing pleasure, almost all intercourse positions fail to really persistently, consistently, adequately stimulate the clitoris. So we're still in this very sort of intercourse oriented version of sex. So I think the idea of developing a much more female-centric approach to sexuality that really accounts for and includes female pleasure as part of the process, is essential. So with that, I think really understanding how the clitoris works and how sexuality works is important.
So positioning is really important to stimulate the clit, and that when that is very, very important. But let's talk about how important is rhythm.
Yeah, I think the first thing that's most important is just timing. How do we think about oral sex? Do we think of oral sex as foreplay? Do we think of oral sex as core play? I think for many people, for many men, oral sex is the first thing they're going to do as soon as they're with a woman in bed. And what I like to tell all of my clients is that, for me, great sex fundamentally is a process of mutual absorption, getting into a flow state, being able to turn off your thinking brain, being able to relax into pleasure. So if the first thing we're doing is taking off someone's pants and, getting down there, with our heads and mouths, the most important thing is just, I think, is allowing someone to get aroused, beginning above the head with your connection, beginning above the waist, really thinking about oral sex, not just as foreplay, but really as like potentially a complete act of lovemaking. So I think, first of all, just becoming aroused, just letting your brain shut off, just being able to warm up and settle into pleasure is probably the most crucial first step. Timing is everything.
And just on that, how long? I mean, how long do you think, or would you?
Well, what do you think?
Down there? Well, it depends on the mood I'm in, I suppose.
Yeah. Well, are you talking about how long before you would let a person go down there, or how long a person should be down there?
How long a person should be down there? What are you giving it? What are you giving it? If you're putting the timer on, what are you stopping it at?
Well, I think first of all, men experience orgasm so much more rapidly than women do, and so men cannot project their idea of arousal onto women. Look, I like to suggest to my male clients that before they even consider going down on a partner, that they give it 20 or 25 minutes of just kissing and connecting and touching and talking and fantasizing and foreplay. Yeah, real extended acts of simmering. And
who has the time, Ian?
What else are you going to take time for these days? What? To go get on TikTok, to go check, your social media stats? If you don't have time to absorb into pleasure and sex, I don't know, you need to reorganize your life.
I was going to say you're screwed, but you're actually not screwed. That's the problem. What's the biggest mistake people make, do you think?
I think it's interesting. I think, the biggest mistake people make. I think men sort of think of their tongues or their mouths as sort of like mini penises, and they approach oral sex the way they might approach, intercourse, as opposed to thinking. Again, remember, the vast majority of nerve endings that stimulate female arousal are on the surface of the vulva, not internally inside the vagina. And the clitoris really responds to consistent rhythm, persistent stimulation, a light touch. It's really a dance in which a woman leads, and a woman can modulate pressure and rhythm. There's a lot of just intuitive communication that happens. But then at another level, Jennifer, I meet so many men who would love to take the pressure off of their penises, right? I mean, today's young men, I meet so many young guys who have psychological erectile disorder. They're in their 20s, they're in their late teens, they're in their late 20s. They want nothing more than to get rid of all of this performance pressure. And they love the idea. They're turned on by the idea of going down on a partner. But I'm also always a little awestruck at how reluctant so many women are to really relax and receive oral sex. There's sort of these genital self-esteem issues.
Yeah, why is that what it is? It's just embarrassment, awkwardness. Like, what is it? Why do some women feel like that, or aren't willing to receive?
Yeah, are not willing to receive. I think a lot of women worry that their vulvas are the least attractive parts of their bodies. A lot of women worry, well, how am I going to smell, or how am I going to taste? They can't imagine that a guy really enjoys doing this. He must be getting bored. He must just be doing this for her. So it just creates all of this performance anxiety. I mean, so many women who would say, "Oh, it's so much easier to just have intercourse and not have an orgasm," or "It's so much easier to just go down on a guy," but to actually open up and receive that kind of pleasure, I think is quite vulnerable for a lot of women.
I mean, you've done a lot of work on this over the years, of course. And I mean, how long do you think it would take you if I said, could you draw the female genitalia on a piece of paper? I predict you could do that in like 10 seconds. But a lot of men out there, they haven't been given the knowledge, or they haven't studied it, and they don't know where things are and what to do. What would be your first tip for them, or where do they start?
Well, I think it is, first of all, knowing a little bit, about female sexual anatomy, and understanding where the clitoris is located, north of the vaginal entrance. I think it's about exploring the sensitivity of the clitoris. I mean, really, the clitoris is the homologue to the penis. So it's the same tissue being used, it's the same material. Penises grow outward, clitorises grow inward. So the head of the penis is the equivalent of the external part of the clitoris. That's the clitoral glands. What most men would think is the entire clitoris is really just the equivalent of sort of the head of the clitoris. It's the same as the head of the penis. And the clitoris has internal structures. Just as there's a shaft to a penis, there's a shaft to a clitoris. It's just that the shaft is internal to the clitoris, whereas it's external to the penis. And the shaft of the clitoris, rather than just being, one shaft, breaks into two pieces. It breaks into two legs that kind of wrap very elastically around the vaginal entrance. So when intercourse feels good, when friction inside the vagina feels good, or pressure inside the vagina feels good, it's really just those clitoral structures being stimulated. In that sense, so much pleasure and so much of the orgasm are really clitoral orgasms. Even what we think might be a vaginal orgasm is actually really a clitoral orgasm in terms of friction and vibration being internally generated that resonates through the clitoral structure. So I would really, the first thing I would ask is for a guy to, whether it's Googling or just opening up, a textbook on female anatomy, to really understand, where the clitoris is located and how it extends both externally and internally. The other thing that I would say is, again, remember that a woman should really be, two partners should really be properly aroused and properly absorbed. So many women tell me, oh my gosh, a guy just immediately starts going down on me, and my brain just isn't in it. I'm still thinking about, what's happening outside of the bedroom. I'm still thinking about chores that need to be done, or work that needs to be done. So again, so much is just about relaxing and getting, absorbed into the moment.
Well, you did say that earlier. You said start with
Yes.
the neck up and get the head in
Yes.
the game
Yeah.
before you
Yeah.
continue.
Yeah.
Is a lot of your therapy with clients overcoming how to communicate with a partner and starting that conversation? Maybe they're in a marriage, 15, 20 years and they want to start that conversation, or they don't know how to start it. Is it breaking down those walls with men?
Yeah. Yeah. Men and women. Again, I think so many of us grow up in, sex avoidant homes. We
Mm-hmm.
don't ever really get the language or the vocabulary to properly talk about sex. We can talk about everything else under the sun, our kids, real estate, our jobs, whatnot. But we believe that sex is supposed to be what? Natural, intuitive. We shouldn't need to talk about it. We should just be able to do it amazingly. So, yeah, I do work a lot on communication around sex. And what I try and remind people is that sex is sexy. And we can talk about, if we use the language of sex and we make our language sexy, it can really be a turn on. It can really be an arousal if we start to talk about why we want to do something because we fantasize about it, or it gets us hot and it turns us on. I think that that's a much more powerful way to talk about sex than to just get completely clinical. Oh, here's the chart. Here's my pointer. Where should I be touching you here
Mm-hmm.
and there? No, make your conversation about sex sexy.
And fun and have a laugh and not be so serious. I suppose I'm just wondering, did you have performance issues after you wrote the book? Because there's a lot of pressure on you now. You write this book in 2004, you claim, you've done all the research, you're teaching people about technique. I wonder when you're in your own dating life and going out and telling people this is what you've made and what you've done with your life, there'd be a little bit of pressure on you there now to perform.
Um, Yeah, well, luckily I have been married for about 26 years to a
Lucky her.
partner, and lucky me, to be
Yeah.
honest. Lucky me, I say lucky me also, Jennifer, because she's very open-minded. Again, I really went into sex struggling with how to perform and how to be sexual, and suffering from sort of fairly common male sexual dysfunctions. And so having a partner who was open minded, who understood that sex didn't just have to look one way, the way it would look in porn. I was very lucky and very, very blessed to have a very open minded partner who allowed me to. Approach sex confidently, with less of a focus on penis and vagina intercourse and more of a focus on just connection.
Do you think young men of today have the same issues as they did 20 years ago in the bedroom, or do they have more things to deal with, like the porn industry and all that kind of, or is it the same
Yeah.
problems you're seeing?
No, no, no. Today's young man has much more access to information, but I think that information brings many more challenges and issues. When I was growing up, I mean, the problem that I suffered from, which is more of a biological problem, is just early ejaculation. When I was growing up, young men did not suffer from erectile impairment in the way that they do today. I mean, that's probably the biggest part of my practice is guys in their 20s who can wake up with an erection. They can have an erection to masturbate, but when it comes to having partnered sex, they have so much anxiety, whether it's porn induced in some way around what they see, that anxiety just does not allow blood to flow into the penis, and so they can't get erections. So many men and women are also on medications that have serious sexual side effects. I mean, I don't know about Ireland, but here in this country, we have millions of young people on SSRIs. I mean, I was talking to a few young women the other day at a dinner party who are in their early 20s, and they've been on anti-anxiety medication since their teens. It's very common, but as a result, they've never really been able to really experience arousal. They've never really had full orgasms. And so sex is something that's really optional for them. It's not something that they really value a whole lot. So I
Wow.
think, we have porn, we have medications. I think, when I was growing up, I was part of Gen X, right? So if I wanted to be sexual, I had to push through this. I had to figure it out. I had to write She Comes First. I had to get the information. Today's younger people still suffer from different types of anxiety, but they can really retreat into a digital world. They can hide behind porn. They can hide behind dating apps. It's like sex IRL, in real life sex, just isn't happening in the way that it happened for me. And so I find so many young people just find easy, safe places to hide from sex. And those face to face interactions are really anxiety
And it's
provoking.
worrying because it's all part of their well being, their mental, their physical, their emotional, their sexual. It's all one, isn't it, really?
If you understand that there's a focus on clitoral stimulation, if you understand that psychological arousal, right? Women can fantasize their way to orgasms without touching themselves. Men can get very robust erections from thinking about sex, looking at something, right? So if we can bring more psychological arousal to sex, if we can understand where pleasure resides in the body. And let's say for a woman who has difficulty reaching an orgasm because she's on a medication, okay, well, let's bring a vibrator into bed with us, and let's add more stimulation and more vibration than one might normally get. Yeah, there are absolutely workarounds. But you have to be willing to be open to them,
And do the
to learn
work.
about them, and to do the work and to talk about them with a partner. Not just fake your way through it.
Yes, absolutely. Ian, thank you so much for the chat today. Your book is as relevant today, unfortunately, but fortunately for
No,
you,
fortunately.
than ever. It's a great read. And I really appreciate your time today. So thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate you as well. And have a great, great day.
I will.